Thank you. All right, so take your Bibles and turn to the prophet Isaiah. We're pronouncing it according to its Greek form, which is what we have. It's Isaiah. But I know that sounds funny to us because we always say Isaiah. Okay, and while you're turning there, let me draw your attention to the chart that we're working on. We're going through the 16 writing prophets of the Old Testament, and we have already looked at Jonah and Amos and Hosea. Can you believe we're already done 3 of them? And today we're looking at Isaiah. And what we're trying to do again is we're working through these prophets in terms of their chronology. And the reason for that is because God's revelation of his history, of his plan of redemption, is progressive, which means he gives a little bit of information, then gives a little bit more information, and then a little bit more. So it's kind of like building a puzzle. And we need all of the parts in order to see the whole. And oftentimes the temptation is to jump to the main prophetic text like Ezekiel and Daniel and pretty much ignore the rest of them. And if you do that, you're not getting the whole picture. And you're not getting to see how Ezekiel and Daniel fit into that whole picture. And it often leads to misunderstanding and misinterpretation. So we need all the parts to see the whole picture is what I'm trying to get at. So again, looking at Jonah, Amos, and Hosea, they have taught us some specific things, and God's going to build on it. So hopefully today, as you go through it, you're going to recognize things that Jonah said, and that Amos said, and that Hosea said. So if we turn in your Bible into chapter 1, verse 1 of Isaiah, you'll see there that God gives us, as he does in most of the prophets, the historical timeline of when Isaiah was a prophet. Again, it says there that he was ministering during the reigns of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. So the chart I gave you last week, if you look on it, on the left side, you see the kings of Judah, and you can find those kings there. And with the dates of when their reign started, and so you can see where it fits in. And then you can compare to the other side to see where the king of Israel fits into the picture. So when we come to Isaiah, one of the first things that we notice here is that Isaiah is ministering to the southern kingdom now of Judah. So Jonah, Amos, and Hosea were prophets in the northern kingdom, and have been mostly focusing on them. And but now Isaiah is going to focus on the southern kingdom of Judah, although he has some things to say about the northern kingdom as well. Now, one of the hints about Isaiah is when you're reading through it is you have to add, whenever he says Israel, and when he says especially when he says Israel, you have to ask yourself, is he referring to the northern kingdom or is he referring to the combined kingdom? Because Isaiah mixes it up. So it gets a little hard for us sometimes. The majority of the time he's talking about the northern kingdom. But because Isaiah has, in his visions that he saw a united kingdom, he often talks about Israel as the reunited kingdom in the future. In terms of the restoration. So that's why he gets us confused sometimes. So just be aware of that when you're reading through the book. Now the book of Isaiah actually divides into 3 parts. There is the beginning part, which is chapters 1 to 5, which we call the prelude. Now the prelude here is Isaiah, because if you'll notice here, I better get my Isaiah. You'll notice here that when Isaiah begins his book, he's actually talking as though it's already been done. So he's seeing this vision of the destruction of Judah and them going into exile, And now here in the introduction, he's speaking to them as though it has already happened. So he says there in verse 2, he says, "O sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, offspring of evildoers, says the Lord has forsaken you. He has despised you because you have despised the Holy One of Israel." And then down in verse 7, he says, "Your country lies desolate." You see, there's that key word that we need to remember. Desolate being the description of the destruction of Jerusalem in particular. So he is in the present, but he is talking as after having seen this vision of Jerusalem being laid desolate. It says, "You are desolate. Your city has been burned with fire, and foreigners have devoured your land." Okay? And so it's a horrible situation. And then he sort of comes to the present, and look at verse 9, because this is a key verse actually to the whole book, because he refers to this many, many times. He says, "If the Lord of hosts had not left us a few survivors, we should have been like Sodom and Gomorrah." So what's the significance of Sodom and Gomorrah?
Destroyed.
They were totally annihilated. Nothing left, nothing on the earth. It was burned to a crisp, and the people were destroyed. Nothing exists to say that there ever was a Sodom and Gomorrah. He says, we would have been like that if God had not left a few survivors. So again, there's that hint of a remnant that God is going to save. So down in verse 18 now, he comes along and he says, so let's reason about this. Let's reasonably look at this. This is your future. And there's only going to be a few survivors. So what does God want from you? And he says, let's reason together. And then he says this amazing thing. Though your sins are like scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. Though they are like crimson, they shall become like wool. What's so amazing about that? Yeah, he's talking about salvation. The New Testament uses these very words to refer to the blood of Christ cleansing us, and that we become white as snow. In fact, throughout particularly the book of Revelation, when it talks about us wearing garments of white, I'm not certain that in Revelation that's literal, but it's talking about this, that we're not scarlet, that is, we're not covered in our sins, which is like death and has the picture of blood and destruction, but we are white as snow and like pure wool from the lamb that hasn't been dyed of any color. That's the idea here. And we're wearing these garments that are white. And this is the picture of our salvation through Jesus Christ. And he says in verse 19, he now says, now remember the covenant that you are in. Okay, do you remember this? Okay, this is almost identical to Exodus chapter 19, after the children of Israel came out of Egypt, brought to Mount Carmel, to Sinai, and God says to them, if you obey, this is what I will do for you. Blessings. If you do not obey, then this is what I will do for you. Judgment. And later in Deuteronomy 28, he says obedience brings blessings, disobedience brings curses. You gotta remember those words. So look at verse 19. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat. So you see it? If. There it is. If you are willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land. There's the blessing. Verse 20. But if you refuse to obey and you rebel, you shall be eaten by the sword. For the mouth of the Lord has spoken. You get that irony there of being eaten by the sword and the mouth of the Lord spoken? So it's letting you know that this is God bringing his judgment on you through the armies of your enemies. All right, so in the rest of chapter 1, he talks about the unfaithful city of Jerusalem, and how bad they were. But then he gives an element of hope in the middle of it. So he says in verse 27, look at it there, chapter 127, Zion, that's another name for Jerusalem. And again, that's another word you have to ask yourself. Is he talking about earthly Jerusalem, or is he talking about heavenly Jerusalem? Because there is a heavenly Jerusalem, right? And one's the metaphor, and one's the reality. I'll leave that to your mind at this point. Look at verse 27, though. Zion shall be redeemed. It's going to be totally destroyed and wiped out and burned. But it's going to be redeemed. By what? By justice. And those who live and dwell in Jerusalem, how are they going to be redeemed? Through repentance and righteousness. So again, what's the picture that we have here? It's the picture of salvation through Jesus Christ. How is Israel going to be redeemed? Through the salvation that comes through Jesus Christ. What's going to be the result of all of this restoration? Well, that's where chapter 2 comes in. Chapter 2 is an amazing description of the Great Commission. Look at chapter 2, verse 2. And it's amazing here. He says, the word of Isaiah, the son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. It shall come to pass in the latter days. All right, we were introduced to that term, the latter days, in Amos. And Amos made it clear that the latter days is the days of the Davidic offspring. Okay, so it says, in these latter days, the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains. Well, physically it's not, but it's going to be. And it shall be lifted up above all the hills. So this mountain is going to grow. Which as soon as I said that, you should immediately start thinking of Daniel chapter 2. It's going to grow and the nations are going to flow to it. Many peoples will come and say, let us go to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and that he may teach us his ways, that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go the law, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. So there's coming a day when there's going to be a mass coming from the nations, from all of the nations, coming to God to find, to follow his ways and to worship him. All right, so the rest of the chapters there in 2 and 3, they talk about the judgment of God again and goes into a little more detail. But in chapter 3, he gives this picture in verse 13 now of a courtroom. And God is the judge sitting behind the desk. And the prosecution has already presented their case. And now the judge is going to pronounce his judgment. So in verse 13 it says, the Lord has taken his place to contend. He stands to judge peoples. The Lord will enter into judgment. Okay, and with the elders and the princes of his people, it is you who have devoured the vineyard. Okay, later on in chapter 5, he's going to say that Israel or Judah, the people of his people, are like a vineyard. They're the grapes, and God's the vine dresser, the one who takes care of it. Okay, but he's going to destroy it. But he says, do you know what? It's not me that destroys it. You destroy it from within the garden. And so they spoil the poor in their houses. There's injustice. There isn't righteousness. They crush the people. And he goes on and on about how bad they are and why his judgment is that they will be destroyed. Then in chapter 4, he gives another hint of the hope that they have. 4 verse 2. In that day, the branch of the Lord. Okay, that's going to come up again as we look at the main portions that we want to see today. The branch of the Lord. Okay, this is Jesus Christ. And he's in the New Testament, he says he's the branch. He's the vine, we're the branches. He's the root of Jesse, is what it's getting to. And he's going to clean it all up. All right, chapter 5 there is where he talks about the vineyard and how it will be destroyed. So that's the introduction to the book of Isaiah. That's the prelude. And the thing is, that's the message of the entire book of Isaiah. In his prelude, he gave you everything he's going to talk about in the rest of the book. It's just that the rest of the book is detail after detail and repetition after repetition to give us these main points. So Judah's going to be judged, going to be destroyed, the city's going to be burned, but there's hope, there's going to be a remnant, and it's all in the restoration through Jesus. Although they don't know about Jesus, they're going to know it. So they're going to figure that out in today. Now let me just find where I am. So the rest of the book divides into two parts. And when you actually, if you have commentaries and things and you look at this, you're not going to see this. And part of the reason is 90% of the commentaries out there are trying to make Isaiah fit to the presuppositions. And so they miss the main point. Okay? But it divides into two parts. Chapters 6 to 39 talk about the Son. And chapters 40 to 66 talk about the servant. Okay, the Son and the servant. Right? And so we're going to look at chapters 6 to 12 in particular today. And we're going to pull out some really important sections of it. And sometimes, in some places, you'll find that these chapters, 6 to 12, some people say it's 6 to 11, they call it the Book of Emmanuel. And you're going to see today why. So the specific chapters we're going to look at today, I'll put them up here. So this is how those two sections divide. We don't need to worry about all of those today. We're just going to look at chapters 6 to 12. And underneath there, in the orange are the specific chapters. That's what we're going to look at. So that group right there, those are the verses we're going to look at today. So let's unpack this and see what Isaiah is saying about the Son and how it fits to what he has already said in the context of the prelude. So chapter 6, again, is another well-known text. If you've ever been in churches that have missionary conferences, you'll often hear this read. Or if people are heading out to the mission field, someone's being commissioned as a missionary, they're going to read from Isaiah chapter 6. And the reason they do that is because this is the commissioning of Isaiah, where he is accepting his mission. So in verses 8 to 13, we have that for us. Now, the problem is, or the difference is, that when we commission someone to go to the mission field, we're hoping they're going to take the good news to the people. Isaiah doesn't take good news. Well, he sort of does, but his main focus is the bad news. And God warns him here that they don't have ears to hear, they don't have eyes to see, they're not going to listen to you, they're not going to in fact, they're going to do their best to shut you up and to get you to go away. But God protects Isaiah as he is giving this message. And so in verse 8, Isaiah hears the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" Okay, who's going to tell Israel here, or Judah here, the message? And Isaiah, of course, replies, "Here am I, send me." So he goes, God tells Isaiah to go to the people, and they won't listen to him. So look at verse 1 here. It tells us that Isaiah received this vision in the year that King Uzziah died. So again, if you looked at the chart that I gave you last week, you'll notice that that's 740 BC. All right, that's the year that he died. So in verse 13, he is to prophesy, because he asked God, "How long do I need to give this message?" And he says, "Well, you give it until Judah is destroyed and Jerusalem is destroyed." Well, we know historically that didn't happen until 586. So that's 154 years later. So I don't think Isaiah lived that long. So what is God saying? Okay, he didn't make a mistake here. I think what he's trying to tell him is that, Isaiah, you give the message until you die, until you can't give it anymore. That's probably what he means. The way I wrote it here is probably God means that he's to preach until he drops. So the extent of the destruction is visualized for us there in verse 13. Which is very important. We have to have this in our mind. And it's when he's looking out at this vision of the destroyed Jerusalem, all he sees is a stump of a tree. That's all that's left. I mean, that's a lot of destruction. My tongue didn't want to say the word there for a second. All that is left is the stump of a tree. So again, there's that word left, okay? All right, what did he say in 1:9? If God hadn't left survivors, this is what we're talking about. The stump of the tree is going to represent the survivors that God leaves there. And this becomes the hope. So look at the last line, though, of verse 13. The holy seed is its stump. So he's going to tell us. This is the hope. The holy seed is the stump. Now, it's impossible to tell whether this is plural or singular. But one thing that we know, and we know that this was a problem because in Galatians chapter 3, remember when they're talking about the seed of Abraham, Paul says, it says the seed of Abraham, but it's singular, meaning the seed who is Christ, and not the seed plural, meaning the nation of Israel. Right? So there's this discrepancy. Right? And what we need to know is that this same word that is translated here as seed is also the same word that's translated as offspring. And that has the same problem because singular and plural, offspring is the same word. Right? But it's the same word that's used in Genesis 3:15, where God talks about the seed of the woman. Right? And again, we don't know if it's plural or not, but the New Testament gives us the indication that it's talking singular about Jesus as the one who defeats the serpent. It's also the same word used in Genesis 12 and all of the passages about the promises given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, about your offspring, about the seed of Abraham. Okay? It's the same word, and it's the seed that is the stump. It's in the stump. So we know that he's talking metaphorically here. We also know, because we're smart people, that he's talking about Jesus Christ. He didn't know that. That's why he didn't say the seed who is Jesus. He longed to know, but he didn't know. But we know, so we can say it. So that brings us to chapter 7. So in chapter 7, it begins in the days of Ahaz. So we had in the days of Uzziah, now we have in the days, or in the year that Uzziah died, 740, now we have in the days of Ahaz. Well, which particular days? Well, it gives us now a historic event, or refers to a historic event. This is why I wanted you to read 2 Kings 15 and 16 and 2 Chronicles 28, because it's the historical story that's behind this. He says there, he refers to the time when Pekah, who is the king of Israel at this time, and Rezin, who's the king of Aram. All right, so from your perspective, way up here, we have Assyria, and coming down, we have Aram, which in our English, in our ESV Bible, it translates as Syria. I'm not really sure why they say Syria, because the Hebrew word is Aram, A-R-A-M, but it's Aram, but it is in our modern day area of Syria, and then under that is Israel, okay, and then under Israel is Judah. So there's Assyria, Aram, Israel, Judah. On this side of Judah is Philistia, the Philistines. On this side is Moab, and just under it is Edom, the descendants of Esau. Okay, and then down here is Egypt. So that's the picture. Now I looked in my Bible at the maps at the back of my Bible to see if they had a map of the divided kingdom, and mine doesn't. So hopefully yours doesn't. And so I was thinking that I might provide you one. But you have that in your mind. So what is happening is Assyria is expanding its boundaries. It's getting bigger and assimilating kingdoms into its own kingdom. and it's starting to make its way down into the promised land. And so its first victim is going to be Aram, which is Rezin, King Rezin. And so, if you read in the 2 Chronicles 28, you already know that he's already taken over part of Israel. So there's a sliver of land between Israel and Aram that Assyria has already taken control of. That was where the tribe of Naphtali was. So they've decided we need to get together and beat Assyria, at least protect ourselves from Assyria, but we can't do it alone. We need Judah's help. So they go to Ahaz, king of the Judah, and they say, will you join forces with us so that we can stand against the Assyrians? And Ahaz says, nope, I'm not going to do that. So Pekah and Rezin decide, okay, if you're not going to join us willingly, then you're going to join us by force, and we're going to come down there and capture you and make you part of it. Now Ahaz is really afraid of this, because these two armies are huge, and they're going to come and destroy him. So verse 3 of chapter 7, Ahaz is doing something really smart though, because Jerusalem is on a hill and its water source is actually below the city. But there's it somehow comes up, and there's a pool where their water source is. And so King Ahaz is up there checking this water supply to the city of Jerusalem, and he is thinking of, if they come and they lay the city in siege, then they're going to cut off our water supply. So what can we do to make it so that we still have water, and maybe perhaps we cut off their water supply so that they're not going to stay in siege very, very long. So he's actually doing a smart thing. And while he's up there, God sends Isaiah to him to give him a message. Because remember, he's very afraid. He's really afraid. And Isaiah goes up there, and Isaiah takes his son with him. So this is his first son. His name is Shear-Jashub. Okay, and he goes with him. Now, if you remember when we studied the book of Hosea, it starts in chapter 1, not only talking about the marriage relationship of Hosea and his wife, but then it hones in on his 3 children and their names. And God is delivering a message by the meaning of their names. And this is why Isaiah goes to Ahaz with his son. Because the meaning of his son's name is the message that God is taking to him. All right? And so what does his name mean? His name means, if you have a footnote, it probably tells you, and it probably says something like, a remnant shall return. Okay, Ahaz, you're really afraid, but I want you to know something. A remnant is going to return. What your footnote doesn't tell you is, it has a second meaning. So you can write this in your Bible if you want. And the second meaning is, a portion shall convert. So either a remnant returns or a portion shall convert. Now the reason most commentaries don't tell you that part is because it doesn't fit to their presupposition of what they're thinking about. So Isaiah tells Ahaz not to fear Rezin and Pekah, because God is going to save survivors. Okay? But Ahaz doesn't believe this. He doesn't believe it. So in verse 11, Isaiah tells Ahaz that God wants him to ask for a sign. He says, Ahaz, ask God a sign. Anything you want at all. Okay? It could be to stop the sun. It could be to make the sun go dark. It could be to anything at all. Whatever comes to your mind. A sign that will cause you to put your trust in God. Ahaz kind of gets a little bit religious here, and he says, no, I can't do it because that'll be putting God to the test. The guy's not religious at all. He's afraid of his enemy. He doesn't trust God. He doesn't believe God. So why is he saying this? Okay? He says, I'm not going to ask God for a sign because it doesn't mean anything to me. That tells you the heart of Ahaz. So, verse 13, Isaiah says to Ahaz, well, hear then, O house of David. Oh, why did he call it the house of David? Okay, now, remember when we were studying Amos? I said Amos introduced us to a number of concepts. The house of David was one of the concepts that Amos introduced to us. He calls it specifically the booth of David, so he's referring to the promise of 2 Samuel 7 that there will be an offspring who will build your house. And, but also referring to the Feast of Tabernacles, where in the wilderness wandering, they lived in booths. They didn't build anything permanent, to say that, hey, he's going to build a house for David and we will have a permanent dwelling. This is what he's introduced to us. And now Isaiah is picking up on this, and he says, O house of David. Now, Ahaz was the king on the throne of David in Jerusalem. But he wasn't a believer at all. He was a horrible, wicked guy. And verse 13, let's skip that part. In verse 14 then, Isaiah goes to him and he says, I'm going to, behold, or he says, oops, sorry, I confused myself here because I skipped something. He says, O house of David, is it too little for you to weary men and yet you weary God? He says, you're putting God to the test here. He says, therefore the Lord is going to give you a sign. He's going to give Ahaz a sign. But it's actually not a sign for Ahaz. Because look at what he says there in verse 14. If I get on the right page. He says, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. All right? Now, we know that this is referring to what? The birth of Jesus. Okay? And that happened 700 years in the future to Isaiah. How can this be a sign to Ahaz? It's because it's not. Because what did he call him in verse 13?
House of David.
House of David. The sign is for the house of David. Amos has already told us that the house of David is the remnants that God sifts through all of the punishment who become the remnant. That's the house of David. So, and that's in the future. So Isaiah is now, he's speaking prophetically, and he says, I'm speaking not to you, Ahaz, but to the house of David, the survivors, the few survivors that are going to be the stump, the hope, the offspring that the house of David will survive and continue. And he says, this is the sign that a virgin will conceive and bear a son. So I want you to turn to Matthew chapter 1. I'm not going through this fast enough. I may not get it done today. Matthew chapter 1, verse 18 to 23. Okay, we've already read the Luke passage in our scripture reading. Okay, Matthew chapter 1, verse 18. Now the birth of Jesus Christ took place this way. When his mother Mary had been betrothed to Joseph, now we would say engaged to Joseph, but in Jewish culture, betrothal is actually marriage. There isn't an engagement period. You are actually married, and the only way to become unbetrothed is to go through divorce. The difference is you're not living together. You don't have sexual relationships together. So that's why you're betrothed. So she's betrothed to Joseph, and before they came together, so in other words, she was a virgin, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit, or by the power of the Holy Spirit. Verse 19. And her husband Joseph, being a just man and unwilling to put her to shame, resolved to divorce her quietly. So he was going to follow the law that says that she has to be put to death for her infidelity, but he's not gonna do it. He's gonna send her away. Verse 20. But as he considered these things, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream, probably Gabriel, saying, Joseph, son of David, do not fear to take Mary as your wife, for that which is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son. You will call his name Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. And all of this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. Now, the way I read that is not the way it's written in your Bible. Did you notice that? Okay, most English Bibles put the end quotes that the angel said to Joseph at the end of verse 21. For he will save his people from their sins, end quote. And then the commentaries tell you, then Matthew added to the end of verse 23 as kind of a commentary. But I don't think that's what happened. I think the angel is still talking. And the angel said to Joseph, and all of this took place to fulfill what the prophet had spoken. Behold, the virgin shall bear a son. Why? Because the sign is for Joseph and Mary and their generation of the house of David. Now again, Isaiah does not know when this was going to take place. He doesn't know who it is. He doesn't know who this girl is. He did not have the whole picture. Now, I like to do puzzles. Anybody else like to do puzzles? I like doing puzzles, okay? And one of the things you do is you can find all of the edge pieces and you put them down first, but then you have the lid of the box, which has the picture, the completed picture on the front. You pick up a piece and you try to find where does it fit in the picture, and you go, oh, there. And now you put it down in place. But you cannot finish the puzzle if you don't have the picture. And these prophets did not have the picture. They didn't know what they were saying. They didn't know how to even interpret it. Something we can look at it and say, oh, that's a piece of a barn. And so I know that this goes here. They're presenting this, and they don't know. There's going to be a baby born to a virgin. I don't know when. I don't know who. I don't know how. And I don't know how it fits to the whole picture. Okay? And Isaiah says that this girl is going to have it. So century after century, they're waiting for this. They're longing for this. They're looking for this to happen. And then in Luke, it tells us that Gabriel comes to Mary and she says, you will conceive, have a son. And he says in Luke 1:35, who will be called holy. Isaiah 6:13, what did it say? What kind of a stump? A holy offspring, the holy seed is the stump. You see that? So this is the sign that God has done all that he said he will do. Let me explain. There are two kinds of signs in the Old Testament. Two kinds of signs. One sign is a sign that is given before the event, and the other sign is given after the event. The sign that's given before the event is given to create hope and trust. You can trust me that what I said is going to happen because I'll give you a sign that proves that I am trustworthy. Everybody follow? Okay, that's why he said to Ahaz, Ahaz, I'll give you a sign. You don't trust me. You don't fear me. You're going to put your trust in Assyria, and that's going to backfire on you. But you can trust me. I'll give you a sign that you can put your trust in. And he refused. He says, okay, I'm going to give a sign to the future generation so they know that I have done everything I said that I will do. It's a sign given after the fact. So when this happens, it will be a sign that all that just happened occurred to my plan and my sovereign work. So when Jesus was born and the angel told Joseph that this is what Isaiah said is the sign, this is the sign. Mary's the virgin. Jesus is the child that is born to the virgin. He's the sign from me that everything that has happened between Isaiah and the birth of Jesus happened because God fulfilled everything he said would happen. You follow? Now, think about that for a minute. There are implications from that about all of the prophets. And what all of the prophets are saying. It is virtually saying the same thing that Paul says in Corinthians, where everything is amen in Jesus Christ, which means it's all fulfilled in Christ. Christ fulfills all of the prophets. And this is what it's saying. And the sign that he has fulfilled it is his birth. God with us. There's a lot of time between Isaiah and the birth of Jesus. Okay? Assyria destroys Israel. Babylon destroys Jerusalem, takes Judah into exile. The Persians conquer Babylon. They let the Jews return to the land of Judah and rebuild the city of Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. Only it's got nothing in terms of its glory that Solomon's temple looked like. Okay? And there's still no David holding the scepter on the throne. Okay? They're not an independent kingdom anymore. That still hasn't happened. Okay, and so they're longing and thinking of this day. And then comes the Greeks, or the Persians, and then comes the Greeks, and then comes the Romans, and they're still under the authority of a foreign government. There is no Davidic scepter on the throne. Okay, there's King Herod, but he's just a puppet of Rome. Okay, and finally the virgin gives birth to a son who's called Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins because he is Emmanuel. He's the sign that God has kept all that he said he would do through the prophets. When Jesus comes, Isaiah says, you will know that God has fulfilled what he said he would do through my prophecies. You follow? The holy seed, the holy son, is the stump. He is its lifeline. The birth of Jesus is not only the stump of Jesse, but he is the sign that God has done what he said he would do, which is to restore the survivors to build the house of David. And that's all we know at this particular time, because Amos told us and introduced this concept to us, and now Isaiah's introducing us. Okay? So we don't know anything else. So we can't go too far in terms of what we're thinking here. So come back to Isaiah now, to chapter 8. To chapter 8, and we want to, because in chapter 8, Isaiah introduces us now to his second son. Okay? Another message from God by the name of his son. I'm going to come back to the name of the first son in a moment. Look at 8 verse 3. And I, that's Isaiah, went to the prophetess, okay, that's Isaiah's wife. She conceived and bore a son. Then the Lord said to me, call his name Mahar-Shalal-Hash-Baz. For before the boy knows how to say my father or my mother, the wealth of Damascus, Damascus is the capital city of the kingdom of Aram, whose king is Rezin, and the spoil of Samaria. Samaria is the capital city of the northern tribes of Israel, who Pekah is the king. It will be carried away by the king of Assyria. Look at verse 7. The Lord is bringing up against them Israel and Aram, the waters of the river, mighty and many, the king of Assyria, and all his glory, that will rise over the channels and go over all of its banks. So he's before Israel and Aram can come and destroy Judah, God sends Assyria to destroy them. And Ahaz didn't trust God. He didn't believe him. So remember, he went there with his son, and he said, look, this is God's message to you, that God is going to... a remnant is going to be returned. He is going to save a surviving group. Look at the rest of verse 8. And it, that's Assyria, will sweep into Judah. It's going to overflow and pass on, reaching up to the neck. Syria is going to come and take and attack Judah, but it only goes as far as the neck. It's not going to go in front. See, there is a remnant. There are going to be survivors. And its outspread wings will fill the breadth of your land. Oh, what does he call the land?
Emmanuel.
Emmanuel. So not only will Assyria defeat these two nations, but it's also going to come right up to Judah and almost defeat it. But it's going to come to its neck, but it's not going to cut off its head. Okay, this is Genesis 3:15 language. Because in Genesis 3:15 it says of the seed of the woman that the seed will crush the head of the serpent. And we have this description all through the Old Testament of when you defeat an army, a foreign army, you crush the head. Right? And that's when you know that it's done for. And he comes to Judah and he does not crush the head. God will stop Israel and Aram and Assyria from going all the way. So why did God preserve Judah? That's the question. Because they were just as wicked as Israel. In fact, it's said to you, remember reading in 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles, that Ahaz was as sinful as the kings of Israel? Did you notice that? And in fact, he did something I think was probably even worse. Because what did Ahaz do with his sons? He sacrificed them to those foreign gods. This is a king on the throne of David sacrificing his kings to Molech and Baal. Sons. God, in the context now, he's speaking to the house of David as a future people. And then he says in verse 13 that Israel, this land or rather Judah, he calls the land, O Emmanuel. What does Emmanuel mean again?
God with us.
God with us. So what's he saying? I think he's saying here that the house of David is the house of Emmanuel. You see, they are going to think in terms that a remnant will return and rebuild the kingdom of David. And he's saying, no, that's a figurative picture. Because it's not the physical land that is Emmanuel, but it's the people who are Emmanuel, the house of Emmanuel. And who's Emmanuel? Jesus is. Look at verses 9 and 10. Isaiah is describing here what the land will be like up to the coming of Emmanuel. Okay, he's actually speaking to the enemies of Judah, which are Israel and Aram. Verse 9 he says, "Be broken, you peoples, and be shattered. Give ear, all of your countries. Strap on your army and be shattered. Strap on your armor and be shattered. Take counsel together, Israel and Aram, but it's going to come to nothing. Speak a word, but it will not stand for," what does it say? God is with us. If you saw this in the Hebrew, do you know what it says? It says, it will not stand for God, for Emmanuel. That's the Hebrew there. Emmanuel. For God is with us. And what's he doing? He's putting it forward into the future to the time of Christ. In verses 11 and 12, Isaiah says that God warned him not to be like Ahaz and Judah, who feared Israel and Aram. He feared them as conspirators against him. He says, don't fear them because God is in control. Look at verse 13. "But the Lord of hosts, him you shall honor as holy. Let him be your fear, let him be your dread, and he will become" what?
Sanctuary.
A sanctuary. What? The Lord of hosts becomes a sanctuary? A man becomes the temple? He says not only will it become the temple where you come and meet God, but it will become a stone of offense, a rock of stumbling to both houses of Israel, Judah and Israel, a trap and a snare to the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and many shall stumble on it. Okay, what's he talking about here? He's talking about Jesus. Okay, jump over to Isaiah chapter 28 just to see this, because he brings this out again. 28:16. Behold, I am the one who has laid a foundation in Zion, in Jerusalem, a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste, and I will make justice the line and righteousness the plumb. Paul quotes this verse in Romans 9:33 to say, to say that Jesus is the stumbling block. And he says, the question here is God faithful to his promises? I mean, what about national Israel? God's not fulfilled his promises. He says, yes, he has. It's that the promises were not for national Israel. The promises are for the remnant of Israel who believe. And he quotes this to prove it. That in Jerusalem, when Jesus came, that there were some who accepted him, but the majority stumbled over him and they put him to death. That's what Isaiah is talking about. Jesus is the sanctuary. He's the temple. It's a man who becomes the temple. Jesus is the temple. He's the place where they're going to find God. And in finding God, their sins would be forgiven and they would be justified. All right, jump back to Isaiah chapter 8, verse 18. Verse 18. This is a great verse. Isaiah says, behold, I, that's Isaiah, and the children whom the Lord has given to me, that's Shear-Jashub and Mahar-Shalal-Hashbaz, we are signs and potents in Israel, and there he means both north and south, from the Lord of hosts who dwells in Mount Zion. Okay? Mount Zion is in heaven. What's a potent? Anybody know what a potent is? A sign and a potent. A potent, if you look it up in the dictionary, is something that foreshadows a coming event. So he's saying that we are signs and shadows of coming events. Right? So what does the Joshua mean again? It means a remnant shall return, but it also means a portion shall convert. Well, which one is to be applied here? Well, when you look at all of the exiles who went to Babylon, they were in Babylon, but they certainly had a hope that they will return. Because it's all like, you read Daniel and he talks about the hope to return. In fact, in chapter 9 of Daniel, when he's praying, he says, hey, I'm reading Jeremiah here, and this 70 years is going to be over. And now we can return. And so he's praying that they will be able to return. And this was the hope of the Jews and the exiles in Babylon. However, the idea of a return for the exiles was the prospect of someday going forward by going backwards. Okay, we're going to go ahead in that we return by going back to where we were. We're going to go back to the old covenant. We're going to go back to the old city. We're going to build its walls. We're going to go back to the old temple. We're going to rebuild it. And we're going to go back and put a king of David on the throne. Except it never really happens. They build a semblance of a temple, but it's really nothing. And they were never out from under the control of a foreign government. That was their hope. They believed that one day they would find their way back to a promised land where a biological descendant of David would once again hold that scepter. But it doesn't happen. But that's not the message of the prophets. Jonah predicted, remember we studied Jonah? Jonah predicted that there would become a new redeeming grace, pictured in the metaphor of Jonah in the belly of the whale for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay? And then Amos, and he said, and that will create a new society. And then Amos comes along and said that God's going to shake the nation like a sieve, a remnant will fall through, and those people that fall through, who come through all of this, the remnant, with the son of David will raise up the house of David, and they will dwell with the people of Edom, their enemies. You see, that's an important thing. Hosea comes along and he says that God's going to heal their apostasy and turn the anger away from them. And the sign will be 3 days and 3 nights, which we already know Jesus has referred to in Luke 24 as being the reference to the resurrection of Christ. Isaiah now is saying that the remnant will return, but they're going to go forward not by going back. They're going to go forward by going ahead. They're going to go to a new temple, who is now Jesus, a new covenant through the cross of Christ, to a new land, a heavenly kingdom, where the King Jesus, Emmanuel, dwells via the ascension of Christ. And it's in these ideas that Jeremiah and Ezekiel are going to expound on when we get there. And Isaiah, of course, is going to come back several more times, as we're going to discover when we go ahead in Isaiah. All right, bear with me here. So remember the prelude. God is bringing the curse of the covenant upon them. He's going to preserve a few survivors. But those survivors are going to be forgiven. Though your sins be scarlet, they shall be as white as snow. And he says, Zion, the New Jerusalem, shall be redeemed by justice, and those who repent by righteousness. Okay? It's not just by returning and saying, hey, I'm a Jew, and we have a covenant by circumcision, and we have this. No, that's not going to work. It's now repentance and being declared righteous. Okay, it's a new redeeming grace. It's going to, and he says, it shall come to pass in the latter days, in the days of the Son of David, that all of the nations are going to flow to it. It's a new grace with a new people in a new kingdom. That's the picture that we have so far. And the message of Isaiah is that they will be restored not by going back, but going forward to this new sanctuary, to the stone of offense, to the realm of the Son who is called Emmanuel, where justice and righteousness reign, where the child born to us, where the child that is given to us is the mighty God, the everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace, who establishes an eternal kingdom and is the great light to the nations. All right, we're almost done. It looks like we're not, but we are. All right, so let's move on. The new kingdom is a kingdom of mixed people from the nations who come to God through Jesus Christ. So if the New Testament looks at the meaning of the name of Isaiah's son, Shear-Jashub, then if we take the New Testament's word for its meaning, it means that they have reached its fulfillment not in the return of the remnant, that is under Ezra and Nehemiah, where they try to go back but fail, but in the conversion of Jews and Gentiles in the first century after the resurrection of Jesus Christ right up to the present. The remnant that returns is the portion who convert. So both meanings apply, but the remnant returns goes forward to a new king, a new temple, a new kingdom. All right, chapter 9. In 8 verse 17, Isaiah says that he will wait for the Lord who is hiding his face from the house of Jacob, and I will hope in him. So he's expressing his hope in this child that's going to come. So Isaiah is turning his attention now to Israel, northern tribe, to the prophecy of Amos and Hosea concerning the restoration of Israel. In verse 1, Isaiah calls the land of Israel, the northern tribe, he calls it what? What does it say there, verse 1? Of chapter 9, yeah. 9:1. The Galilee. Do you see that? The Galilee of nations. Okay. Jesus spent all of most of his earthly ministry in Galilee, which is part of the northern tribes. And he calls it here the Galilee of the nations. This is the first time in the Old Testament where it's called this. But it's quoted by Matthew. It's quoted by Matthew in chapter 4 of Matthew, verses 15 and 16. And what does Matthew say it's talking about? It says it's talking about the gospel going to the Gentiles. Oh, see, this northern tribe, this literal land area of Galilee is going to become the place where the gospel of God begins to go to the nations. All right, so, in verse 3, he mentions the harvest, okay? So Amos and Hosea both talk about a harvest. And in talking about the harvest, they said the harvest, remember, Hosea said the plowman can't even go out and plow because the harvest is still going on. It's a perpetual harvest, so they can't even replant because it's continuing and continuing. Okay? And this is what it's talking about. There's coming a day when God is going to harvest the Gentiles into the kingdom for a long time. And we know what that period of time is. So that's why Matthew cites this. In verse 5 of chapter 9, he says here that the war is over. The war between Aram and Israel, it's over. and even with Assyria. And God is now establishing a new kingdom, a new government under his son. How do we know that? Well, look at verse 6. For, because, how do we know that? Because unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The Son of God, the Son of David, okay? And the government, that's the kingdom of God, shall be upon his shoulders. They're thinking that this is the government of Israel. No, it's the kingdom of God. Will be on his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, or Wonderful Strategist is a better way. Mighty God. The only place in the Old Testament where it's directly said that this child is God. Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, the increase of his government. Okay, there's going to be these harvesting of people. His kingdom is going to grow and grow and grow, and it's going to grow in peace. There will be no end. It's going to be an eternal kingdom on the throne of David, so that they understand it's not David's literal throne here. It's God's kingdom. It's David's offspring's kingdom. The promise of 2 Samuel 7 is that the son of David, his offspring, will have a name and a house and a throne that will last forever. And he will establish it with justice and with righteousness. Justice, when did God show his justice? Okay? Romans chapter 3, through the death of Christ. God judged the sins. He was just. Righteousness, he will declare the people righteous from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Okay, and David on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, verses 30 to 34, he said, David's in the grave. Jesus is his offspring, and his ascension to heaven, where he sits at the right hand of God, is the fulfillment of the promise given to David in 2 Samuel 7. Jesus is reigning on the throne now, ever since. All right, chapter 10 of Isaiah. If I don't go too far off, I've only got 2 pages left. So the rest of chapter 9 and 10, they talk about the judgment that God's going to bring on Israel under Assyria, and then God's judgment on Assyria. So we're going to skip those sections, but jump to chapter 10, verse 20. In verse 20, Isaiah sees another vision now. And this is a vision about a day after all of the destruction, where he sees the remnant of Israel returning to trust in the Lord, the Holy One of Israel. Now, I can't take the time right now to take you through all of the verses, but just take my word for it at this time, and you can look this up later. But look up all of the verses that contain the title Holy One of Israel, and you'll come to this conclusion, that this is not God, but this is Jesus. Every time he talks about the Holy One of Israel, he's talking about Jesus sitting on the throne. Right? You will soon, and so they're going to come and they're going to trust in Jesus Christ. Verse 22 says, For though your people Israel be as the sand of the sea, only a remnant will return. says the promise given to Abraham was that the people, your offspring will be as large as the sand of the sea. But they disobeyed. They were large. Under Solomon and David and Solomon, they were a large kingdom. A strong, mighty kingdom. But God's going to wipe them down until they're just a small remnant that are left. Here's the thing. There is absolutely no biblical record that the northern tribe of Israel, ever returned to the land. You heard the phrase, the lost tribes of Israel? Anybody heard that? All right. What they're meaning is these northern tribes that were taken in by Assyria were assimilated into Assyrian culture and other cultures, and we don't know where they are. We don't know where they are because God said, they're not my people. I'm wiping them out. But there will be a remnant. Well, how can there be a remnant if they're not there? Well, it's easy. Paul confirms in Romans 9, 27 and 28 that they returned to the land on the day of Pentecost, because he lists them all. He says there were Jews from all over, and he names all the provinces of the Roman provinces where these Jews came from. What are they? These are Jews that were Samaritans, that are half Jew and half Gentile, who are remnants of Israel, but also remnants of Judah that went to Babylon and didn't return to the land. And what do? They come down to Jerusalem to celebrate the feast, and they're there at Pentecost. And what happens? 3,000 turn in faith in Jesus Christ. He's fulfilling this promise. Do you see it? This is the confirmation of 10:20. The remnant of Israel will come and trust the Holy One of Israel, will trust in Jesus Christ. Chapter 11. In 11:1, we have an inclusio. So 11:1, 6:13, remember, talked about the stump. Okay, 6:13, the holy seed, the holy offspring is its stump. So Jesus is the lifeline that's going to restore the house of David. Now look at 11:1. There shall come forth a shoot from the stump of Jesse. Okay, so it's like two bookends, and everything in between is about the stump, the stump of Jesse. And a branch from its roots shall bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord will rest upon him. As soon as you read that, who is he talking about? Jesus. Isaiah didn't know that, but we know that because we have the New Testament. Jesse's the father of King David. The stump of Jesse then refers to the dynasty, the house of David. Not the physical kingdom that belongs to David, or even a physical throne, but the house that comes through David, the dynasty, and is in fulfillment of 2 Samuel 7, which Paul talked about in Acts 13:23. Okay, Acts 13:23, Paul's on his first missionary journey, and he goes to the synagogue in the city of Antioch in Pisidia, and he's recounting there the history of Israel. So he starts with the patriarchs, and then goes to Moses, talks about Saul, and then he talks about David. Listen to what he says in Acts 13:22. He raised up David to be their king, of whom he testified and said, I have found in David the son of Jesse. What's that referring to? Isaiah, right? Isaiah, what are we, 11:1? I found the son of Jesse, a man after my heart, who will do all of my will. Of this man's offspring, God has brought to Israel a Savior. And who does he say it is? Jesus. But what's the last word? As. Did anybody look up the verse? Okay. The last word is as promised. Where is it promised? Isaiah 11:1. You see, when you have the New Testament, it tells us the things that we can specifically know that what they're talking about. And there's too many people who read all of this portion in Isaiah, and they say it's not talking about Jesus, it's talking about something farther ahead, future ahead. He says, no, it's talking about Jesus at that time, coming in his birth, dying on the cross, ascending into heaven. All right. So in Isaiah 11:10, 10 and 11, the root of Jesse becomes the sign or the signal for the people. Now, a signal is when you go into battle, you'll have a flag on a really high pole or something, so that when the soldiers are out there fighting against their enemies and they get disoriented, they need to know where they go to head back to their home base. And all they have to do is look up and they see the signal flag there and they go, oh, there it is there, and they go in that direction. So it's the signal that leads them home, is what he's showing. Basically, put that applied to the remnant. He's saying here, Jesus is the signal that leads people home to God. Just follow? When the people, verse 10, of the nations see the sign, they're going to rest in him. That's the other thing. It's again the nations. He's now saying it's not just the remnant that we call Jewish people, it's Gentiles. The remnant is defined as Jews and Gentiles who come to God through Jesus Christ. And that's what Paul is all about in Romans 9 to 11. It's the Israel within Israel. The ones who come to faith in Jesus Christ. They return by going to Jesus, to his kingdom. So he's defining for us what the return is. The remnant will return. What does it mean? It means they return to God through the Son. Chapter 12. This is where we end, and this is quick. Look at chapter 12, verse 1. You say in that day that, you will say in that day, I will give thanks to you, O Lord. This is the day that they return. I will give thanks to the Lord, for though you were angry with me, your anger turned away. What's that? That's propitiation again. Remember we saw that in Hosea? It said the anger of God was turned away from us. Romans 3:25. Your anger turned away that you might comfort me. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. Okay, Ahaz, you're afraid. You don't need to be afraid. God is God. For the Lord God is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. With joy you will draw water from the wells of salvation. You will say on that day, and what day is that? It's the day that the child is born. The child is given to us. The child that is born through the Virgin. Emmanuel, God with us. It's Emmanuel's day. You will say on that day, give thanks to the Lord. Call upon his name. Okay, Romans 10:13. Everyone who calls in the name of the Lord will be what? Saved. Why are they saved? Because Christ is the end of the law for righteousness to everyone who believes. That's Romans 10:4. Made known his deeds among the peoples. What's that? How do you make known the deeds of God, of Jesus, among the people? It's the gospel. This is the Great Commission, which is already described in chapter 2. Proclaim that his name is exalted. Sing praises to the Lord, for he has done gloriously. Let this be made known in all of the earth. Shout and sing for joy, O inhabitants of Zion, for great in your midst is the Holy One of Israel. So let me conclude by saying this. A word of caution. Be very careful about reading the prophets from your presupposition, where you think you know what it means. You've got to look at it in context. You've got to look at it and say, is there anything in the New Testament that tells me what this means? And that's the interpretation that you got to go with. It doesn't mean that your presuppositions are wrong. They might show up in later. But at this point, you've got to be careful. We're building. It's progressive revelation. We're building prophet on prophet until we come to the conclusion. Piece by piece, putting the puzzle together. At this point, Isaiah is not talking about anything beyond the time of Christ, or at least beyond the time of Christ and the apostles. Okay, let me give you a last word from Luke chapter 24, verses 44 to 48. Jesus said to his disciples, these are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled. Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures, and he said to them, thus it is written that the Christ, okay, thus it is written where? In the law of Moses and in the prophets, that Christ should suffer and on the third day rise from the dead. That's Jonah and Hosea, and that repentance for the forgiveness of sins should be proclaimed in his name to all nations. That's Isaiah, beginning from Jerusalem, which is exactly what Isaiah is saying. You are witnesses of these things. What does Isaiah say the name of Messiah is? Emmanuel, God with us. Isaiah is saying that after Judah and Israel have been destroyed, there will be a remnant who will return to God, proclaiming the name of the child, Emmanuel. And all Jews and Gentiles who believe in him will be saved. All right, friends, I've gone way past. So next time we're going to look at chapters 27 and 35. You can read from 13 to 35 if you want, because we'll just skip it over those things and highlight them. All right, but that's where we're going. So, Jeremy, if you want to come and Tim, it's twice. Lead us in our last song. So, okay, our last. As soon as you see the title of the song, you're going to say, "Oh, yeah, that makes sense." Okay, it's a Christmas song. O come, Emmanuel. What's he talking about? He's talking about Isaiah chapter 7 and 9. All right.
Let's stand together while we sing.
O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lowly exile here, until the Son of God appear. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, thou rod of Jesse, free thine own from Satan's tyranny. From depths of hell thy people save, and give them victory o'er the grave. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. Thou day spring, come and cheer our spirits by thine advent here. Disperse the gloomy clouds of night, and death's dark shadows put to flight. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel. O come, thou King of David, come and open wide our heavenly home. Make safe the way that leads on high, and close the path to misery. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to thee, O Israel.
So now you all know that when the song says "Come to thee, O Israel," it's not talking about